Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Yes, you read the title correctly. I think that this particular 2-part episode of Ultraman Blazar is what Shin Godzilla should have been, at least in some areas, but I'll get to why later. First of all, I want to address the fact that, on its own, this is still a really good 2-part episode. There always comes a point in the Ultra series where, after several episodes of being able to defeat a kaiju before the credits roll, there comes a monster that's just a little too much, and thus takes more than 1 episode to defeat. In this case, that monster is Nichikagachi, the Rainbow Serpent. I wonder if it's inspired by the Rainbow Serpent of other nations. Well, that's something to look into another time. The point is, however, that Nichikagachi is the first big bad, the first kaiju that escalates things and requires a little more effort to take down. But, fortunately, it doesn't feel like they escalated things too much too fast. By that I mean it doesn't feel like they faced Nichikagachi and he was such a huge threat that now any other monster they're gonna face is just gonna be small potatoes by comparison. No, Nichikagachi is more powerful than what they faced before. He's not insurmountable, clearly. And you get the feeling that even with as powerful as he is, there might still be something even worse out there. So, kudos to the team for that. They managed to properly escalate things without going too far, but also not having it feel like the way they defeat Nichikagachi is a cop-out. Also worth noting is that this is where we first see a slight element of the show being somewhat toyetic, but not in a bad way. You see, one of the issues that was plaguing other Ultra series prior to Blazar was the fact that they were basically serving as toy commercials for Bandai products. That was basically what they had fallen into. And I'm not the only person who's pointed this out either. Other people have been pointing to it as well. Part of why so many people have praised Blazar specifically is because it basically did away with that element. There was still an understanding that there would be merchandise, because there's always been merchandise connected to the Ultra series, but it wasn't made, the show wasn't made, with the explicit idea of peddling that merchandise. Instead, they just went with the approach of, let's make the show as good as it possibly can be, and it will be the quality itself that allows the merchandise to sell. It won't be like we're telling them, hey, go out and buy all of this cool stuff you see. It'll just present the cool stuff, and then kids and adult collectors alike will just want to get the merchandise simply because they like it. And so far, that's been proving to be the case. And man, what a relief that is. I did say, however, that we get a hint of something like that in this particular 2-parter, but it's handled really well. First of all, we know that the way Blazar is summoned by Gento is the little wrist thing that appears. I believe it's called the Blazar Stone, or is the Blazar Stone supposed to be the name for the coins that he inserts? Well, whatever the case, when I first saw that, obviously there were products made of it, because that's going to be a cool thing. But when I saw that there were coins, and I looked at images of the product being sold and saw that there were a whole bunch of coins, I did wonder if they were going to start introducing more coins as the show went on, and sort of, you know, have him developing new powers that way. I think that is what's going to be the case, but now we've actually seen how it's going to happen. And again, I think this is one of those instances where the focus is more on the story than it is on selling something. Because at the end, Blazar grabs all of that rainbow stuff leaking out of Nichikagachi and basically absorbs it, turns it into a new coin that he inserts, and then he has a new attack. So yes, that does mean, like, it's one of those things where get the coin, insert, and you can have the new power. But like, that doesn't result in a weapon, at least not yet. It results in something that can't possibly be sold as a physical item. So in an interesting way, they've come up with a product that, yes, is a toy based on a show, but it also encourages kids to use their imaginations while using it. Now ain't that a novel idea? And then of course we have Earth Garen's Mod 2 upgrade, where he gets those shoulder-mounted cannons to make him look even more like the Millennium Mechagodzilla. Now, yes, there was this idea of that's going to be something that you can potentially sell. I have the Earth Garen figure. The parts on the back that you install those things in are right there. They come with the Nichikagachi figure, which is on its way as of this video's filming. So yes, there was a sort of product thing there. But again, in context, it's natural. Earth Garen is a machine. Machines get upgrades. It's only natural for that to happen. It was even foreshadowed in Dorgo's episode where they were testing the railguns. We saw that they had the same color scheme as Earth Garen. So it was planned. We knew it was going to happen, and it fits into the story. The point is not available now wherever Bandai products are sold. It's just progressing the story the way it needs to go. Both characters get their upgrades at the right time, but they're not the sort of upgrades that are being in your face about it. It's a part of the story, just as it should be. In terms of the human side of things, this is the first time that Teruaki has gotten a chance to be in the spotlight, though he isn't in it that much. Not in the first episode, certainly. In the second episode, he's the one who confronts Professor Yokomine, who is the actual human antagonist of this particular two-parter. And I'm pretty sure I'm getting their names right. I apologize if I'm not. I did read them before doing this, but I'm not always that good with names, especially if they're names that aren't in the English lexicon. So I'm sorry if I am messing them up. But anyway, what we do see of Teruaki is that he's actually pretty smart. Like, all of the characters are intelligent if they're going to be in Scarred, but he's got a wisdom to him. He's insightful because he's actually able to intellectually outwit the villain. And boy, am I glad he was able to do that. You know, in Western fiction these days, there's an especially annoying trend of, especially in movies like comic book movies and stuff, where the villain is not proven wrong. In fact, you sometimes get the impression that the writers might think the villain is right. I think it kinda started, or at least it really got rolling, with Avengers Infinity War. Watch that movie again and pay attention to every time Thanos expresses his eco-terrorist ideology that's motivating him to gather the Infinity Stones. Whenever he states all of that, and he's telling it to one of the heroes, what do the heroes say in response? Really nothing. They say he's insane, but what difference does that make? They never actually refute his argument. By the time Endgame comes along, they're not even dealing with the same Thanos, so that argument has been put aside, which is another thing that's wrong with that movie. But anyway, point is, Thanos is never properly refuted, which is why it's somewhat disturbing to say so many people seem to think he's right. And I mean, in the real world, people think he's right. Those people are delusional, mind you, but that's a whole other topic. The point is, you have to have the villain properly defeated, not just physically, but also if he represents an ideology, you have to refute that as well. That used to be a common thing. Used to be that if you had a villain who represented an ideology and the hero did see that there was some sense in that, it created a more intense conflict, but there would always come a point where the hero and the villain do separate. And this is how it goes. The hero, when presented with a challenge to his ideology, he will adapt. he will recognize, okay, this is a problem that needs addressing, I will keep that in mind, but I will find a better way to address it. Whereas when the villain gets challenged, say the hero comes along and says that, I see what's going on now, I see what you're trying to do, this is not the way to do it, join me and we will find a better way, the villain will reject it. He will remain rooted in his ways, not change, and continue with his plan that will ultimately cause chaos and destruction and death. Why does he do that? Maybe it's because he feels it's just too late to turn around, the die has been cast and he can only move forward. Maybe it's because he's become so narrow-minded and so set in his thinking that this is the only way that he just can't see another solution. Or maybe he reveals it was all a ruse and he didn't really believe in the ideology, he was just using it as an excuse to cause destruction and chaos. Whatever the case though, that used to be the point where the heroes and the villains would diverge on ideological terms, and that hasn't been happening much in the West. It happens here. Teruaki confronts Professor Yokomine, and Yokomine's spouting his stuff that we've heard in a whole bunch of kaiju stories about how mankind is the real monster, humans are destroying the environment, humans need to be wiped out in order for the world to regain what it used to have and be at peace and balance again. And Teruaki points out the one gigantic flaw in that line of thinking, specifically in the way that Yokomine is going about doing it. And he points it out so brilliantly that the professor admits he can't refute it. He admits he lost. Ideologically, he is in the wrong. But it's not up to him anymore to decide what happens. And that is the point where he does truly become the villain and says, what happens next, only God knows. See, that's how you write a good ideological battle between a hero and a villain. And I wish we had more of that in modern Western fiction. Well, I can always do my part in my own novels. But getting away from that, I did open this video and even entitle it by implying that this episode, this two-part episode, is better than Shin Godzilla. So let's get into that. Okay, so it was pretty clear to me from very early on when Nichikagachi first showed up that he was meant to be inspired by Shin Godzilla. All of the elements were there. When he first shows up, he's not really moving that much. When he does start moving, he's very slow and lumbering in a very straight line. When that skull-like head shield splits and peels away, he's referred to as changing. Gee, you mean like Shin Godzilla was a changing creature? He's also the first kaiju in this particular series to be referred to as a god. The other things have been aliens or monsters, but he is deified. And of course, we have the idea that Nichikagachi was summoned by a disillusioned old professor who has a particular affinity for kaiju. Goromaki, anyone? But my word, this is so much better than what Shin Godzilla did. First of all, we have characters to follow and care about. Granted, we've taken the time to establish them up to this point, and that's been over the course of multiple episodes, which accumulated would be longer than your average movie. But still, we have a cast of characters we know, we care about them, we want to see them succeed, and that is far more than Shin Godzilla ever had. Plus, Goromaki, you may recall in Shin Godzilla, he wasn't even in the movie. He was the character who got everything started. He was the character who actually had a backstory, who had a motivation, and he's not in it. But here, the professor who summons the monster is in it. He's an active member of the story. And you see in that case how maybe the movie would have benefited if we did have Goromaki be more active. And as for Nichikagachi himself, he is not a stoic, immobile creature like Shin. He starts out that way, and he is a bit more mysterious than the other creatures. We don't necessarily know him that well, but what we do know about him paints a clearer picture of his motivations And he's responsive to things. He can move. He actually does stuff. Furthermore, these episodes answer the 3 questions that I've said in the past Shin Godzilla raised but never answered. Those questions, if you need the refresher, are: why is the monster here? Where is it going? What will happen when it gets there? Even the Great Buddha arrival, which was about a literal statue, had those 3 questions answered. Shin Godzilla never did. It acted like it was going to answer them, but then it didn't. The point is, in this 2-parter, those questions are answered with Nichikagachi. Why is the monster here? Professor Yokomine summoned him. Where is he going? He's going to Hidora City. Speculate on your own time about the naming conventions. What's going to happen when he gets there? Well, we already saw a bit of it where he caused a storm when Earth-Garen first confronted him. So now he's accumulating even more storms, and it seems like he's in this specific place because of some event that happened in the past, referred to as a reset, Japan's reset specifically, which is when this whole kaiju thing started, perhaps. They keep hinting at what the backstory is. They haven't fully divulged it yet, but we keep getting these breadcrumbs, and this is perhaps the biggest piece of crust we could get. That was a really weird way of putting it, I realize, but I'm going to leave it in because I said it and I'm going to commit to it. And yes, I realize Ultraman Blazar and Earth-Garen are there, so they do kind of force the character of Nichikagachi to do more than just walk around. But I feel like even if they hadn't been there, we still had more to work with and more to get attached to than Shin Godzilla presented. But since Earth-Garen and Ultraman Blazar are present, we also can factor them into the whole characters we care about thing. So again, that is why I say this episode is better than the movie. Now, the ending does imply that maybe Yokomine will come back. Maybe there's more going on here. After all, he's a kaiju expert. He might know certain things. He might know of other monsters he could summon. The ending kind of is ambiguous. He's just sitting there fishing again, which seems to be the thing he likes to do, and when he hears a monster roar, he smiles. Is he smiling because he believes things are going to work out? Is he smiling because he has a new idea about how to make his plans go forward again? Maybe he's smiling because in the previous scene they finally brought back those tomatoes, which, as we all know, is the greatest thing in the whole Ultraman Blazar series. And even though they got limited screen time this go around, I'm glad to see that they came back, and I do hope that Tsuburaya Productions will continue to deliver on those tomatoes and continue to get just the right amount of footage in order to help make this series the best it possibly can be. Remember, the more this series implements tomatoes, the more likely it will be remembered for generations to come. But anyway, those are my thoughts on this particular 2-parter. I'm not just basing it on the fact that I like it more than Shin Godzilla based on similar things it does, but better. I really do think that on its own, it's just a darn good episode. 2-parters are usually where the Ultra series steps up its game, though. And next time is Pigmon, or is it Goramon? It sure looks like Pigmon, but I guess we'll see how they explain it when the episode itself comes along. Will I review that one? We'll see. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omnivault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.